Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to get started in the next 30 seconds or so. As you've recognized, the Food System Summit Plus 2 has a very tight agenda, so we're trying to do the best we can to stay on time. Good afternoon, everyone. We don't quite have a full table here, but we're going to go ahead and get started because our first speakers are indeed already here. Excellencies, distinguished guests, colleagues, friends, ladies, gentlemen, it is a pleasure to be joining you. My name is Nancy Aborto, and I'm the Deputy Director of the Food and Nutrition Division here at FAO. And so on behalf of FAO, I welcome all of you who are here in the room to the FAO headquarters and to Rome. And for all of you who are joining us online, I welcome you to today's event, and I am very pleased you've joined. Our event is entitled Towards Healthy and Sustainable Food Systems, Agroecology, Soil, and Healthy Diets. I am one of the moderators today, and I am representing as moderator the Coalition of Action for Healthy Diets from Sustainable Food Systems. Now, the purpose of that coalition is to really accelerate an increase in impactful actions by numerous stakeholders across food systems and to align that action for collective impact for both healthy diets and the sustainability of our food systems. So we're thrilled to have an opportunity to partner with other coalitions, namely the Agroecology Coalition, the Coalition of Action for Soil Health, and the Food is Never Waste Coalition. So we're really taking a holistic systems perspective from soils to production to bioeconomy to what we are actually eating in order to accelerate food systems transformation. Now, before I turn over to my co-moderator, I want everyone to know that we do have simultaneous interpretation today in English and French and Spanish. You've all got headsets here in the room, so we do have some interventions that will not be in English, and I'll try to remember to remind you of that when we get there.
Thanks, Nancy. Good afternoon, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. Buenas tardes a todos. With over 1/3 of the Earth's surface being degraded, the ecosystem's ability to produce healthy and nutritious food is very much limited. A powerful lever, agroecology, provides sustainable solutions to issues of soil degradation, climate, biodiversity, food security and nutrition, including precarious livelihoods and social inequalities faced by farmers and food system workers. Today's side event aims to help us better understand the linkages between healthy soil and healthy food and the role of agroecological approaches and biocircular economy in producing food that is healthy for both the people and the planet. Our side event is organized in 3 parts. The first part is setting the scene with 2 representatives from the 2 coalitions providing the keynote and 2 other representatives from the other coalitions providing their reaction. The second part is a mini roundtable session to highlight some country experiences, followed by quick reaction from the audience. And finally, we'll have some reflections offered by some of the ministers who are joining us today. So without much further ado, I'd like to call on Frank Roy, coordinator of the Indigenous Partnerships for Agrobiodiversity and Food Sovereignty, to set the scene for today's conversation. Frank, you have 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Oliver. I come from a matrilineal community in northeast India. Every morning, the lady of our homestead lights a fire with twigs and cooks the family meal. She then cleans her simple fireplace and neatly collects the ash. Then she goes to her family land to spread the ash on the fallow area for nourishing it, and at the same time to gather food from the fallow areas that may be sweet potato or seasonal wild edibles. Indigenous peoples recognize that when soil health gets better, crops, wild edibles, animals, and human health also get better. Their traditional knowledge, based on observations of the biodiversity around the landscape, also gets better. The vocabularies depicting their natural environment also gets richer, and their storytelling becomes more interesting and meaningful. I'm pleased to be here because the food systems of indigenous peoples share very much in common with the basic principles of the sponsoring coalitions of this side event. There's much to be learned from the food systems of indigenous peoples. For example, we are working with local schools in Northeast India, introducing nutrient-rich wild edibles for school meals with community support. We use chefs to glamorize our local food systems. We support mother cafes of community entrepreneurs to promote local livelihoods. We use FAO and IFAD's tools to promote improved nutrition of children and young mothers. However, a current lack of general evaluation of indigenous people's food systems and the marginalization of indigenous food and peoples in policy processes have hindered such learning exchanges. Our latest project, supported by the Rockefeller Foundation and working in the indigenous food systems in India, Thailand, Kenya, and Mexico, seeks to characterize these food systems according to FAO's 10 principles of agroecology and to build evidence on the ways that these food systems support biodiversity, ecosystem services, resilience, food and livelihood security, and social and cultural well-being. We also make use of storytelling as a way to uncover the important principles and values that underpin their food system and their agroecologies. Whilst we are yet to consolidate our findings, our early results from India and Mexico have shown that indigenous people's food systems can be considered to be highly agroecological. But indigenous food systems also face common challenges such as climate and ecological crisis, political drivers, knowledge loss, and youth migration. We therefore recognize the importance of forging partnership and developing solutions through an intercultural learning approach. Indigenous peoples' communities mobilization approaches can offer important lessons for nature-based food system. For example, indigenous people systems do offer some risk management initiatives at different scales. The diversity of their food systems nurture pollinators and natural pest management organisms. They build resilience. Their predominantly rain-fed systems do not inundate fields and produce no methane emission as in conventional systems. The generation of forests in the fallow and surrounding lands as part of their management practices have made their local food system as inherent carbon sinks and low emitters of greenhouse gas. Working together and identifying commonalities and shared ambition, we can forge new and transforming partnership for scaling up life and value affirming food initiatives. The 476 million indigenous peoples of the world can be a group of game changers of this new paradigm, provided they are acknowledged, they are supported, and not disrupted or marginalized as they have been historically done. They need to co-create a research framework that builds on contemporary science and traditional wisdom as equal partners. They need assistance to develop a dedicated cadre of indigenous youth to scale up indigenous food system best practices and to enhance their local and global leadership skills. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Frank. I mean, indeed, one of the important principles of agroecology is equity and inclusiveness. So I think it's really important to remind ourselves of that. Food systems are responsible for 30% of greenhouse gas emissions, 80% of deforestation, 70% of freshwater use, and the single greatest cause of terrestrial biodiversity loss and land degradation. But all of these are actually interconnected. To tell us more about this nexus, I'd like to call on Patrizia Fracassi, Senior Nutrition Officer at FAO, to talk to us a little bit more about this nexus. Patrizia, I say minuti.
Thank you so much. So with my brief presentation, I would like to highlight the need for solutions that address the climate change, biodiversity, and the nutrition nexus. To address the nexus, our theory of change is based on the following premises. If biodiversity within and across ecosystem is protected and promoted as the foundation for healthy life and healthy diets through agroecological, people-centered approach, then a wider range of sustainable production systems will be incentivized. And as a result, a variety of safe and nutritious food will be made more accessible and affordable throughout the year. This theory of change can serve as a guide for policies and programs to holistically address biodiversity and healthy diets in the context of climate change, adaptation, and mitigation. We are looking at transformative changes within the food system that generate beneficial outcomes in all dimensions of sustainability: health, sociocultural, economic, and environment. The launch of the initiative on nutrition and climate change, ICAN, at the COP27 fits with this approach. How does this work in practice? Let's look at the contribution of livestock to food security and nutrition in the context of climate change to enhance all dimensions of sustainability. Next slide. So we know that 25 to 30% of all the land on the planet is grassland. Much of this land is used by livestock for grazing and cannot be used to grow crops. In this sense, livestock supports biodiversity conservation. On the other hand, the livestock sector plays a central role in greenhouse gas emissions and is responsible for overgrazing, land degradation, loss of natural habitats, and water pollution. Livestock is therefore both a threat and an opportunity for human and planetary health, depending on the context and on the production practices, but also on the food environment and on the consumer behavior, on the consumption patterns. So agroecology principles can foster a symbiotic relationship between plants, animals, human, and environment. And this symbiotic relationship can improve soil health, combat erosion, and support biodiversity. Integrated production systems can improve feed quality, reduce enteric and methane emissions, and increase resilience to climate variability. In addition, the link with the food environment, which was actually discussed in the previous session, is really important, but it's often overlooked at the policy level, especially the link with the domestic and trade market. If this link is overlooked, there is a risk that large corporations can influence both the supply and the demand and will dominate strategic decisions. This can drive unsustainable practices, in terms of both production and consumption, and hamper a fairer distribution. Consumption data on animal source food show high level of inequities by income groups within and across countries. Food-based dietary guidelines can provide accurate recommendation on what is appropriate to consume as part of healthy diet, advising reduction in contexts that are dominated by high intakes. Food choices driven by health and environmental concerns are shaping sustainable practices in terms of production, distribution, and consumption. And this can be all fostered if we take an holistic food system perspective. If you are curious to explore other entry points within the food systems, I would like you to recommend to listen to FAO podcast that my colleague will put the link in the chat. In this podcast, we have gained insights from colleagues working in different divisions within FAO and in other organizations. Thank you.
Grazie, Patricia. Thank you very much. I think it's important to also hear from other coalitions in terms of, what is their take and reflection from all things that we've heard from the ground up to talk about the perspective from the Soil Health Coalition. Leanne, the floor is yours. You have 4 minutes.
Great. Hi, everyone. I'm Lee Winowicki. I'm a soil scientist at C4ECRAF in Nairobi and one of the co-leads of the Coalition of Action for Soil Health. And I'm so pleased that Dr. Ratan Lal is with us here today. He won the World Food Prize in 2020 for soil-centric approaches, and he's also the co-lead of the coalition. And as was started the session today, we're here because over 1/3 of the Earth's surface is degraded, and we urgently must all work together to transform food systems collectively and from the soil up. So this session is very inspiring because we have so many committed coalitions to this goal, to this task. And as Frank said, because healthy soil provides nutritious food, it contributes to climate change mitigation and adaptation, biodiversity. So it's critical that we put this at the center. So the Coalition of Action for Soil Health took root in the Food Systems Summit in September 2021, and it continues to grow. We are so pleased because this coalition did not exist prior to this food system process, the summit process. And we have one main goal, and it's to improve soil health globally. We know we have to tackle barriers, as everyone mentioned, around collaboration, financing, implementation, policy, and if you were in the red room today, science and research. So these are the 4 original targets of the coalition. Integrating soil health into policy, not just in agricultural policy, but climate change policy, development policy, across all of the sectors. Expand action research to really address critical knowledge gaps that are still kind of plaguing the scaling or adoption of healthy soil practices. Increase the number of hectares of land under healthy soil. And the 4th one, and I'm glad we have a representative from financing institutions, increasing the financial incentives that reach farmers 5 to 10-fold. And one of the key outputs that we've been working on the last 18 months and that we launched at COP27 is the resolution on soil health. So this resolution, we hope to support member states to bring this forward at COP28, so that's the next slide, is very simple. It's not too detailed. And so we really want to support member states, anyone who wants to sign up, recognize that soils are critical for healthy food system transformation. Affirm that agricultural systems can be part of the solution. Let's stop having negative statistics about food systems and contributing to climate crisis. Stress the importance that all 3 Rio conventions, climate change, combating desertification and biodiversity come together and recognize that healthy soil is essential to meeting those goals, stress that we can contribute to the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration with farmer-centric approaches, and really just affirm that more action is needed, local and international, to bring soil health to the global and local agenda. Dr. Lau started this by winning the Food Prize in 2020, but let's build on that momentum and make this a reality, and we hope to launch the resolution at COP28 in December. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much, Liam. So see you in COP. The other thing is, while food is produced, a lot of food is produced already and it's enough to feed the world, a number of this goes lost or wasted. To give us a sense of their take in terms of reflections from the Food is Never Waste Coalition, I hand over the floor to Barry Martin from Rabobank as well. You have 4 minutes, Barry.
Well, thank you, and thank you for having me. And usually I speak as a financier and not as a coalition signer, so I'm sure there will be questions about that later. So so Rabobank is extremely committed to looking at food. Food waste, loss and waste is obviously a big thing. Everybody knows there's a third. Can everybody hear now?
Okay. Yeah. All right. So it's a major thing. So we are talking about social impact, right? So there's a triple win on food loss and waste. So think about the social impact. A third is just thrown away, and think about it. Half of that is a loss and half of that is waste. The loss is basically lack of income that doesn't go to a farmer himself, because it's really lost at the beginning, and we all know the stories and what we have seen around the world, the tomatoes rotting around the street, or not having enough cool storage so that we can put the fruits in there. So it's quite terrible. At the other side, you also have the waste at the side of the consumer. I think if you think about it, when was the last time that you really had a campaign at home that we think about don't throw food away? Right, think about it, right? So how many of you use a spaghetti meter every time you make, we are in Italy, so right, I can talk about spaghetti, right? How many of you use a spaghetti meter so don't cook too much spaghetti? 1. Hey, 2. Hey, think about it. So I think when we talk about the win that we have here with food waste and loss, we talk a lot about the loss in the value chain in the beginning, which we need to invest, the one that Brian was also talking about. But there's a lot of the waste today is done actually in our own homes, but we don't think about what we eat and how we food. So that's, for me, that's extremely important about economic impact. The other thing is of the economic impact, the reality is we don't value nature in the things that we produce. Because we don't value nature, it's so cheap to throw food away. If we would have put the price of the land, the biological, the ecological services of the indigenous people, if we would have looked at all the costs that is in the value chain, if we would say the value that we have of the CO2 in the land, if you talk about the biodiversity that we have used to produce that food, that nutritious food, most of them, many of time, because spaghetti is very nutritious, I love it, right? So, no, it's just would change completely because it's just so cheap to throw it away. We just don't have the right price, or not at least the right incentive to have the right price. So that's the economic value is immense, right? The social impact, think about it, right? So more than 1 billion people today either have not the right food or is in hunger. And it's a third of everything we produce. So, I mean, that's already a quick fix there for what we need to do. And now, obviously, if you think about food is emitting 30% of all, or 30 to 35% of all emissions in the world today, a third of that is food loss and waste. Think about it, it's as big as a country, or even it's the third largest country in emissions. So it's an easy win. Think about it, the all emissions, it's, and if you put the price of what today, if you look at the stock, the ETS in Europe, it's valued around 95 euros a ton of carbon. If we only would do the carbon, They already do the carbon value. It's already pays for all the things that we need to do to make all the investments. It's just we have not done the right thing. We have not priced it. So that's why, yes, I'm very committed to Wood is Never Waste Coalition. Everybody sign, please. It's an easy thing. It's an easy way of really making a big difference because it's a value chain. If we want to change the system, we need to start with the same small things.
Thanks very much, Barry. It's really important to anchor these conversations at the global level, but also it's important to link it at the grassroots level, at the country level. Nancy, what do you think?
I agree entirely. And on that note, we have another panel that is going to take us from that global thinking, our holistic thinking, all the way down to that action on the ground. Because as I heard in one of the sessions this morning, that's where the rubber hits the road. We have representatives from various parts of the world that are joining us in a mini roundtable, and I say mini because the clock is very small, and I appreciate that, but I'm hoping that this will spark interest and inspire some further conversations between all of you here and our panelists. So let me quickly introduce everyone. From Brazil at the end of the table, we have Fernanda Machiavelli. She is the Vice Minister of Rural Development and Family Agriculture. Welcome. Next to her, from the Asian Farmers Association, we have Miss Irish Bayelat. She's the coordinator of the UN Decade of Family Farming and Women Farmers Agenda. Thank you for joining. On my left-hand side, we have Mr. Amadou Orly Diallo. Amadou is joining us from Senegal. He is a technical advisor at the Ministry of Higher Education, Research, and Innovation. And next to Mr. Amadou, we have Ms. Madeleine Kaufmann, who is from Switzerland. She is the FAO coordinator and policy advisor at the Swiss Federal Office for Agriculture. So to get us started, I'm going to start with the Vice Minister. Vice Minister is going to give her remarks in Portuguese, I understand? In Spanish. Okay, fantastic. So if you want to put on your headphones, if you need that support. Vice Minister, Brazil has been an example, a real example of putting multiple actions, efforts around the topics that we've been talking about so far into action. Could you take a few minutes to elaborate how efforts to support consuming healthy diets are linked to efforts for biodiversity protection in Brazil?
Thank you very much. Gracias por la oportunidad de estar aquí con ustedes hablando sobre un tema que es tan importante para nosotros. Yo vengo del Ministerio de Desarrollo Rural y Agricultura Familiar, que representa 77% de los establecimientos rurales en Brasil y es responsable por la producción de los alimentos. Están allí, son agricultores familiares, los indígenas, los pueblos, comunidades tradicionales, los pescadores, los beneficiarios de la reforma agraria, en fin, un conjunto de actores que producen los alimentos. Y nosotros volvemos al gobierno en el inicio de ese año, el presidente Lula, y nos trajo el desafío de retomar las políticas para el desarrollo rural sostenible. Y una de las estrategias fundamentales es el proceso de transición agroecológica. Nosotros estamos encantados con el sistema que presentara, porque estamos trabajando con una segunda generación de políticas públicas que pueden enderezar las tres perspectivas, no solo la seguridad alimentar, pero también las políticas ambientales y las políticas agrícolas trabajando juntas para crear los incentivos correctos para el cambio de los sistemas alimentarios. Nosotros retomamos la Política Nacional de Agroecología y Producción Orgánica. Yo tuve la satisfacción de coordinar el proceso de construcción participativa de esta política en 2012 y ahora nosotros retomamos con un conjunto de instrumentos que se integran con políticas de diversas agencias, ministerios brasileños. Entonces yo voy solamente a citar alguna. Entonces, la Política Nacional de Agroecología está bien. Digo que estoy hablando muy rápido. Entonces, una de las estrategias es la política nacional, como dijo, y un programa para fortalecer las redes de agroecología que trabajan en los territorios. La segunda política muy importante es retomada del programa de financiamiento para la agricultura de bajo carbono que nosotros en desarrollo familiar, en desarrollo agrario, consideramos las políticas que estimulan la transición agroecológica y la extracción de los productos de la sociobiodiversidad. Establecemos precios mínimos para los productos de la sociobiodiversidad para que sea rentable mantener la floresta en pie. También trabajamos con un nuevo pacto de asistencia técnica y extensión rural focado en la transición agroecológica y prácticas más sostenibles de producción de alimentos. Para garantizar la seguridad alimentaria, nosotros también retomamos las políticas de compras públicas de alimentos. Tenemos uno de los más reconocidos programas de alimentación escolar del mundo y ahora también retomamos el programa de adquisición de alimentos con foco en la producción agroecológica. Y nosotros también tendemos trabajando con las mujeres rurales. Pienso que las mujeres son las grandes responsables por la producción de alimentos en Brasil. Son las cooperativas de producción de alimentos hoy, muchas de ellas ya están siendo lideradas por mujeres. Entonces trabajamos con un grande programa de microcrédito que es también 1 millón de loans, préstamos por año. Y ahora doblamos los valores para que nosotros podamos hacer la inclusión productiva de los agricultores más pobres, más principalmente de las mujeres rurales. Hay una serie de estrategias que estamos implementando, es un largo percurso, pero aquí quiero comprometernos con este proceso y también manifestar nuestro interés de participar de las coaliciones que están siendo lideradas, construidas en este espacio. La coalición de agroecología, por supuesto, pero sé que hay muchas otras que también podremos colaborar y estamos entonces a disposición. Muchas gracias.
Muchísimas gracias. Vice Minister, we appreciate your passion that took you into speaking very quickly because that passion was really coming across. So we appreciate that very much. And someone else who I know has passion comes from a different continent. Mr. Amadou, you're joining us from Senegal, and you've just heard the Vice Minister's remarks. I know that Senegal has experienced linking this action for quality soils, production, and nutrition value of what we're eating. Could you tell us a little bit about what's happening in Senegal? Mr. Amadou is going to speak in French, so I invite you again to utilize your headphones if you need them. Over to you.
Merci beaucoup. Merci pour cette question. Pour juste spécifier aussi, je vais donner des réponses en liant vraiment les enjeux de la planète versus les populations. Donc, sur ce plan, il y a beaucoup de politiques qui sont mises au Sénégal. Donc, je vais commencer par les engagements internationaux. Le Sénégal est engagé dans les conventions des Nations Unies sur les changements climatiques, la Convention sur le commerce international des espèces et faune et la flore sauvage menacée d'extinction, la Convention sur la biodiversité, le Forum national le Forum des Nations Unies sur les forêts. En termes de déploiement national, sur le plan politique, la troisième institution du Sénégal, elle s'appelle Conseil économique, social et environnemental. Après la présidence, l'Assemblée nationale, le Conseil économique, social et environnemental. Donc, pour dire que tout ce qui est structuration de l'économie du développement du Sénégal, le volet environnemental est pris en compte. Les politiques agroécologiques sont clairement identifiées comme option de la transformation structurelle et durable du développement et du secteur agricole au Sénégal à travers quelques politiques. Je vais citer quelques exemples. Le PSE. C'est le plan Sénégal émergent, c'est le cadrage de l'économie sur l'horizon 2035. Dans ce PSE, il y a une composante PSE vert qui a permis de faire la structuration de l'économie du Sénégal en pensant à une approche One Health. Un environnement sain, des productions agricoles saines, un habitat sain, et puis le livestock, tout ce qui est élevage tout doit être intégré dans l'approche One Health. Vraiment, c'est la politique aujourd'hui au niveau du Sénégal. Donc, suite aux enjeux induits par la Covid et puis la guerre, donc cette politique-là a été réajustée, donc sous forme de plan d'action prioritaire qu'on a appelé PAP 2A. Aujourd'hui, on est en train de structurer le PAP 3A. Donc tout ça, c'est en s'ajustant pour que le développement prenne en compte cette approche One Health. Les locaux, les élus locaux, les maires, tout ça, ils ont mis en place des organisations pour que ces politiques-là soient appropriées. Il y a le réseau des villes et communes vertes et écologiques du Sénégal, le REVES. Il y a aussi, ce qui connaît un peu le secteur de l'agroécologie, il y a une commune qui est vraiment commune modèle, qui est la commune de Ndiop, dont le maire vraiment a pris ces pratiques agroécologiques pour l'implémenter comme action de développement. D'ailleurs, ce maire-là, aujourd'hui, c'est le maire de c'est le président de tous les maires du Sénégal. Donc, juste pour donner l'exemple. Donc, à travers les sociétés civiles et les ONG, il y a une dynamique, la dynamique sur la transition agroécologique, qui aussi est tellement active, a mis en place des structures locales qu'on appelle les DITAEL, pour mettre la transition agroécologique localement. Et c'est en recevant cette organisation-là que le ministre d'antan, le professeur Moussa Baldé, a pris une initiative des subventions sur les intrants agricoles, de prendre une partie, 10% pour les donner pour des intrants bio-organiques. Donc, c'est une initiative qui est là, qui est en train de faire son cours. On est en processus d'évaluation. Sur le plan de l'énergie, aujourd'hui, presque 30% de l'énergie au Sénégal sont renouvelables. Donc, tous les aménagements, les pratiques agroécologiques, les installations des fermes, tout ça est adossé sur de l'énergie renouvelable pour tout ce qui tourne autour de la gestion de l'eau. Et puis, donc, le transport, pareil. Le secteur environnemental, il y a la création de l'Agence sénégalaise de la reforestation Grande Muraille Verte, qui est très gros. Sur le secteur agricole, vraiment, les pratiques sont là. Il y a le code pastoral qui a été récemment adopté, et ça va pousser vraiment à mettre à jour la loi sur la loi agro-silvopastorale au Sénégal, qui gouverne vraiment comment les pratiques agroécologiques. Donc, pour pérenniser tout ça, c'est l'éducation, la formation. Il y a beaucoup d'universités qui sont là, qui sont formées, des instituts supérieurs, avec vraiment un volet agroécologique. Il y a des universités destinées vraiment à l'agriculture, où il y a des curricula qui ont été mis en œuvre. Donc, voilà. C'est juste, pour conclure, alors, mais pour conclure, juste vraiment remarquer la présence d'Émile Frison. Je ne peux pas manquer parce que au début c'était très difficile, mais à travers lui, on est arrivé là avec le secrétariat permanent. Merci beaucoup à la coalition pour m'avoir convié à cette rencontre. Merci.
Merci. Appreciate that array of examples, and there's so much to say, so I appreciate you squeezing it in, and I hope again that this can provide an opportunity for people to link up after having heard those interesting remarks from Senegal. Now I'm going to turn to Switzerland. Ms. Kaufmann, thank you for joining. Switzerland is known as a leader in innovation, and we've heard some really exciting examples from these two countries, but we know that we have to continue to innovate, especially with the changing world in the face of climate change that we're experiencing. Can you tell us a little bit about how Switzerland is viewing food system transformation, especially with your leadership role in innovation?
Yeah, thank you so much, and thanks for the opportunity to be with you today and to take part in this mini roundtable on country level experience. It's a real honor for me. Switzerland is representing Europe in the Agroecology Coalition. We are still growing, 20 or 46 countries by that time, 120 organizations, and lately Germany actually joined, also Peru, so the family is still growing, which is very nice. So, ladies and gentlemen, Switzerland is, as you said, committed to food systems transformation towards more resilient, inclusive, and sustainable food systems. And in our view, designing and implementing policies and intervention for food systems transformation need to be first innovative, and second, to done in a way that they are systemic and holistic, as my previous speaker also said. And this is where Switzerland sees really the power of agroecology as being able to provide the right framing anchored in the 13 agroecological principles and the 10 elements of agroecology by FAO. And the Swiss Federal Council has embedded agroecology in cross-sectoral strategies and policies reports recently adopted, be it in the 2030 Strategy for Sustainable Development or also the report on the future orientation of our agriculture policy beyond 2030. And in this context, I've led a project at our ministry, the Federal Office for Agriculture, aiming to analyze how our agriculture policy actually is performing against these principles. So where is our agriculture policy hindering or fostering the implementation of our agroecology? And the results we have seen is actually that we already have a wide range of policy instruments that are fostering agroecology, like the contribution to agriculture biodiversity, for instance, or also animal welfare. And the agriculture policy has mainly incremental or more incremental, let's say, effects than transformational. I mean, that's what my colleagues told me. Of course, they are more incremental because we are an agriculture policy and we need to address especially the farm and the field level. But what was interesting at this project that we saw also many instruments that had an impact on the entire food systems. And of course, we have also an accountability into the entire food system with our agriculture policy. So some conclusions derived from this project. We did not propose actually to develop new agroecological policy instruments, but rather to mainstream agroecology in existing policy instruments. And we concluded first to use the principles as a compass for the development of policy frameworks in a holistic manner. So our agriculture policy will be framed as a food systems policy. Then second, as an approach to highlight synergies and trade-offs to design policies. So I think trade-offs need to be named, for instance, so that they can be consciously also weighed up in the political decision-making process. And then third, also as an instrument to promote dialogue, to strengthen collective learning in policy making. The report on the future orientation of our agriculture policy was developed with a wide range of actors, farmers, food processors, civil society, and so on. So this being said, we really look forward to co-creation and mutual learning processes with coalition members on the design and implementation of agroecological policies. And let me close with maybe a word to say we need more together and less in competition. I really think we need all stakeholders on board, be it farmers, researchers, private sectors, also young men and women that are the future of our food security, and all the approaches also on board to achieve this food systems transformation. And I think agroecology is really synergistic and not competing with other efforts to make this food transformation happening.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And your last remark about all stakeholders being around the table is a great segue to our final speaker on this panel. Our first three speakers all came from a governmental perspective, but we know all stakeholders have to be at the table. So we're very pleased to have a representative from the Asian Farmers Association. Ms. Irish, could you tell us from your perspective some things that are happening on the ground that farmers and their organizations are driving to link the topics that we've discussed today?
Yes, thank you. But first of all, I just want to thank the organizers and the supporters of the coalition for bringing us here, for inviting AFA. Indeed, it's good to know that we are included in the discussion, in the debate, and in the consultation process. And I hope this is also replicated at different global processes and regional processes, and more importantly, at the national processes where farmers, smallholder farmers, are heard, not just in in the policy design, but even up to the implementation of policies. And I think I've also heard a lot from our the speakers, specifically from Frank Roy and Vice Minister, that I wanted to also highlight. So yes, I'm from the regional network of farmers organizations. So I'm here representing our members in 16 countries in Asia. We have 20 national farmers organization, and there are also established regional farmers organization at different region, and we also work with them very strongly. So I think we've heard and we recognize that smallholder farmers, fishers, pastoralists, herders have already been doing a lot. Have been producing not just food, but as said by Frank Roy, have been producing knowledge that we need to recognize, but not just recognize and not just respect, but especially to build on as we transform to a healthy, sustainable food system. So there are lots of knowledge and practices that we need to take advantage of as we transition, and because we are in the reality that our climate, we have a hotter climate, and there are already innovations out there, co-created by farmers that we can actually take advantage of. And as has been said, there are lots. For example, not just knowledge, but also varieties, local varieties of crops that we can build on, that the farmers have been evolving and have been adopting and are appropriate to our to the changing climate now. And it's not just ordinary crops, but these are actually crops that are also nutritious, and some communities, smallholder communities and indigenous peoples communities have been using it for medicine. So there's a lot in our communities that you can actually support and you can build on. So I just wanted to I also wanted to share some examples of practices that we have been doing, which has helped us manage, create synergy in our local farms. And in addition to that, these are some practices that maybe some of you are not new to, but these are practices that have kept the life in the soil alive. So some examples, in Lao, our member, the Lao Farmer Network, have been scaling agroforestry systems, which creates synergy, and this is nothing new, So the concept is there, creating synergy. You have the forest and you have the crops, so they are integrating coffee under forest trees, and they are taking advantage not just of the horizontal land farm, but vertical, to create synergy in their farm. They use the leaves to fertilize and bring back the nutrients that have been lost back into their soil. In the Philippines, the agrarian reform farmers who own less up to 3 hectares, they have been practicing integrated farm. The rice duck farms, it's still there, we know that the duck have been used to actually eat the pests in the fields, and it's out there. In Vietnam, the fish rice system, it's still being practiced. Shrimp and rice system, it's still being practiced by smallholder farmers, because they know that they need to have diverse source of livelihood. They cannot rely on just one crop. In their farms, we have also livestock, we have the livestock, we have the crops, we have trees, and this makes us actually resilient, and it's out there and it's being practiced. And they were able to sustain their livelihoods. They were able to send their children to school because of these systems, and they need to be, I think, supported. And we are supporting our members be able to access the market through cooperatives, as what has been said. So there are stories where some of the regenerative, agroecological, organic practices were not sustained because there's no support to market. But for us, we are promoting cooperative development within, among our membership, so they can be supported. Clustering also is being done so that these practices are actually sustained, so it's also economically feasible to the farmers. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to all of the panelists. I really could continue asking you questions and continuing this conversation because it's all been very insightful, but unfortunately we don't have enough time. We actually wanted to take a few minutes to get a question or a remark or reflection from the floor, but I'm not sure we're going to have time for that. except for one that came in from a youth constituent. And I wanted to be sure to share this because we want to be sure that all partners are at the table. This is Zhao Dang. He says, as mentioned earlier, agriculture holds tremendous potential in mitigating climate change. It can achieve this by implementing conservation practices to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and promoting carbon sequestration. However, the high cost associated with transitioning from conventional practices to those beneficial for soil health and climate change often pose a financial burden to the farmers who are already vulnerable. So he's challenging us to think, how can we collectively work to get over this challenge? So a little food for thought from a youth constituent. Are you going to be very fast? Okay, one last comment.
If farmers can grow a crop called carbon, the carbon credit should bring farmers $50 per acre per year. That would be an income while at the same time promoting climate change mitigation, food quality, and human health.
Great. Xiao, I hope you heard that. One more comment? Okay, very quickly.
Thank you. Juan Sanchez from Peru. It's excellent to hear that Brazil is back again in the agroecological policies. After 4 years of policies against it, my question is, in terms of transition strategies, are you thinking about, for example, a strategy like agroecological recovery of landscapes in order to improve the conditions in the territory? Okay.
Thank you. I think that we'll allow that response to be taken up after the event, but we appreciate your pointing out Brazil's important role in conservation. And with that, one last time, everyone, please join me in thanking our panelists.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Countries and stakeholders on the ground are indeed very important actors. And I know as well that in Tanzania, for instance, they are developing their new ecological organic agriculture strategy. I'm sure stakeholders on the ground, countries, are doing their best to address food systems transformation in their specific context. But at this juncture, I'd like also to call on His Excellency Cem Özdemir, German Federal Minister for Agriculture and Food, to offer his reflections on today's conversation. Mr. Minister, the floor is yours.
Thank you, dear colleagues, friends, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak here today. In the past, I have to say that my country, Germany, did not have enough consideration for soils, for water, for biodiversity, or the climate. However, there has been a change of mindset in favor of ending this overexploitation of nature. And to be honest, I have to say this is under permanent pressure, obviously, by populists, and it is our job to stay in line with what we intended when we started our policy. We have embarked on a redesign of our food systems to make them climate friendly and climate resilient. We've realized that our shared journey will only be successful if we join forces on an international level. That's why this meeting is so important. So that means healthy diets, it means ending hunger and malnutrition around the globe, and because we depend on fertile soils, on our climate, and the conservation of our biodiversity. Agroecology provides us with a strategy for adapting to climate change that has great potential to transform our agri-food systems. That is why we have been long-time supporters of the 4 per 1,000 initiative, which pursues diverse agroecological approaches. And as you mentioned, in June this year, Germany joined the Coalition for Food Systems Transforming Through Agroecology, as our neighbor Switzerland has done already before. So when we talk about climate resilient farming, we need to direct our attention to our soils specifically. Healthy and fertile soils are the foundation of our agricultural sector. We need to be careful about how we handle the soils that we have been given. The question here is, of course, how we can use pesticides as sparingly as possible and fertilizers as efficient as possible. Together, we need to reinforce our commitment to curbing the use of pesticides and mineral fertilizers on our fields. That is why our governments support the European Union's Green Deal, which provides for measurable reduction targets. But we also want to step up the implementation to other agroecological measures, such as diversified crop rotations and variety selection and the use of seeds that are adapted to the respective climate and soil areas. We are also strengthening organic farming methods. Our goal is to reach organic farming by 2030, 30%. Let me conclude by saying this all what I just said is unfortunately questioned by some people who are already part of our national coalition of bringing together farmers, environmentalists, science together because of the unjustified war of Russia against Ukraine. Unfortunately, that is used by some groups to go back to the old concepts before the war and before we reach that consensus. So my job description in a way is to moderate the different sides, bring them together and force them to stay at the table. Thank you.
Thank you very much, His Excellency. We don't have so much time, but I think the message is clear. Synergy is word, systems approach is important, inclusivity and equity. I think these are key words that resonated to all our conversations today. What do you think, Nancy?
Couldn't agree with you more. And I also appreciate this whole conversation of healthy soils all the way to healthy diets, all the way across, because we all have to work together, bringing our strengths to the table to really take that holistic approach. So with that, on behalf of the FAO, I appreciate you all joining us in the room today, all of you online. We appreciate having you here, and I wish you a fruitful rest of the UNFSS+2 stock-taking moment.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining.